Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Welcome to my third episode of The Exploding Human. Thanks for listening in. I'm interviewing a guy today. He's a cowboy. He's a real cowboy. Or he's a part-time cowboy. BRAD LANGENBERG. And he works with horses, doing something I would call it equine therapy. He works mostly with people in recovery, drug and alcohol, people in recovery homes, although he also works with various professional organizations, helping them to learn how to better communicate and to learn about themselves and how they do communicate, and using horses to do that. He has a lot of training growing up around horses. You'll find that out in the interview. And I guess the main thing that I found incredibly fascinating was that horses are entirely nonverbal. And human beings are about, according to Brad, 80% communication is nonverbal with humans. And so there is a connection there, ways that we can learn what's important from the nonverbal. So let's listen in. He knows more about this than I do. That's why I'm interviewing. So here it is, BRAD LANGENBERG. Let's just talk about how you got started with this, because I know you grew up around horses. Where?
Nebraska. Actually, my dad's a cattle feeder there. And my family, and I'll show you a picture of it, my family's been on the same place for 145 years.
So it's a farm?
So they feed cattle. So it's like there's cattle growers. They make cows calves. When those calves get to be 200 pounds, they go to someone like my dad, and he feeds them out to 1,000 pounds. And then they go to Albertsons.
Yeah. Yeah, the supermarket. They get slaughtered.
So when I was a kid growing up, there was a lot of trauma in my life. And there was always horses in the background. So when I was a kid growing up, my nearest neighbor was 2 miles away. So how I got to my neighbors was on horseback. And we were allowed before I started working, during the summers, I was allowed to leave the house when the sun came up, but I had to be back home when the sun came down. We'd be going all day on horseback. So you
were, how old, what you're talking about?
I couldn't put the saddle on. Oh yeah, probably 6,
So you started riding as a kid?
As little, yeah, soon, right away.
And what was that like for you? Was it? Well, tell me what that felt like to be riding horses. Freedom.
Yeah, everything about a horse. When you're on a horse, there's a sense of freedom, especially when you feel secure. Then there's a sense of freedom. If you're not feeling secure on the horse, it's a different feeling.
Yeah.
But there was a sense of freedom, and as a young kid, we don't have so much ego involved with it, and there's a connection kids get with horses that's different than adults. I can't explain it, but it is different. So that's how I got started, and then when I got sober, I was 2 days sober when I came to California, and my hometown, there's 190 people. So when I got to California, I came out here. I thought I was going to an outpatient program, but they took me to 12-step meetings. And when I got here from Nebraska, I can still remember pulling in on the 10 freeway. And it was late at night, and I got on the 10 and I thought, oh my gosh, is there a football game going on or something? There's so many people.
A lot of cars.
There's so many people.
Right. I remember being shocked by the tiers of freeways crossing over each other,
Right.
just east of here. It blew me away. It was a shock. It just felt like I was in some other
Right.
sort of a foreign country or something. But it was here.
Yeah. That's what I had. I felt shock when I got here. So not only was I newly coming off drugs, alcohol, painkillers, pot, many different types of steroids, many different types of chemicals. Some I don't remember why I was taking them.
Yeah.
When I got here, that was being a shock, just being sober, but being in this was a complete shock. So what happened for me is I found my way to up by Will Rogers State Park. And I remember there was an ease when I would get up by the park, and when I was in places like that, I could sleep a little bit. And what happened for me was maybe a couple years in sobriety, somebody had a horse that they asked me to come out and ride, and I got on the wrong horse, and it was a real problem. And so I got interested in what I could do with the horse, and they wanted me to come and ride it more. And
When you say you got on the wrong horse,
yeah, what happened was they said, go get on that chestnut, a red-looking horse. So I said, sure. So I went out there and got on the chestnut. And all of a sudden they came out and they go, oh my gosh, not that one.
oh, so there was more than one.
And I thought, well, that was really nice of you to put me on this horse. It's a freak, So when they saw, because I'd ridden so much and we'd ridden a lot of different horses, they liked what I was getting done with the horse, and I hadn't been around any. And I was going through a different stage of my sobriety at that time and where I was at in my life, and it just took me off in a completely different direction. I'd already been working in recovery. I started working in recovery in 1987.
So you hadn't ridden since you came out here?
No.
And so how long were you working in recovery before you had that?
Probably 5-6 years.
Oh, okay. So you hadn't ridden in 5, 6, 7 years when you got out here?
Yes. I was too intimidated. You know why?
No,
Because I met all these people and they owned horses and they'd been taking all these riding lessons. So I thought, gosh, I don't want to be around these. They're going to know so much. I'd never taken a riding lesson. We'd never done that. We never had any of that happen. And there's something different to being raised with livestock. There's just things you can't teach when you're raised out there with them. You can't teach that. You have like another sense. You have a sixth sense. You know where everything's at. So that helped me out a lot. And I'd heard of, there was a place in Sierra Tucson that was doing equine therapy. And I'd heard about it, and that kind of always got me interested. And my journey began. So that was kind of the story.
Now, is there anything you actually studied? Or it's just intuition and your previous knowledge that got you to...
Well, what's interesting with it is I did go to, there was a place in Tennessee in Nashville. This is in 1995. And now they actually have, they're certifications, but they're certificates of completion. There's no accredited certification out there. There's nothing accredited. Anybody could basically do it. The only tough part would be is getting insurance.
Okay.
So anyway, I did go to on-site, and there was a group of, at that time I was just a mental health worker. And there was a group of psychologists and therapists and
This is in Tennessee?
This is in Tennessee. So we were getting together to put a training program of how to teach to do equine therapy learning to different groups, even to treatment centers. But what I noticed from that was I worked with some fantastic therapists and psychologists. They were really awesome. But what I did notice is most of them weren't really horse people. They owned horses. They'd been around horses, but horsemen is something else. And I'd been around a few. And what happened to me there, you've seen the movie The Horse Whisperer?
Yes.
You've seen that?
I have seen it.
That's about 3 different people. And somebody I knew one of those people really well. And I wanted to know more, and I had been riding that horse that I told you about that was a real problem.
Yeah.
And so I decided to take that horse to one of those guys, and I watched him work with a horse, and I went, this guy's on to something. So
So where was this?
This was in Ojai, actually.
Oh, so it was out here in California. So you had the horse here, so it wasn't that you didn't take it really far. You just were okay.
But then for the next 10 years, I went everywhere in the world to try to learn more what those guys were doing. Because what I wanted to do was marry the two. Because there's so much horsemanship and human behavior. There's so much there between the two. And I knew that these guys knew more than I did. So I spent the next 10 years just following them around. I went to Wyoming, Montana, Salinas.
How did you do that? I mean, how did you get a hold of them? And what was their response? And were they open? Obviously, they were open to it. If people were letting you come and spend time with them, would you go for a couple of weeks, or how would you do that?
Well, they do weekend clinics, and these guys, they do that. That's what they do, is clinics to set that up.
Oh, okay. So they have this skill, and they're teaching teaching other people how to do what they do.
Yep.
What was the main guy's name?
The actual main guy's name was Tom Dorrance.
Uh-huh.
And Tom Dorrance, the lineage of that was Tom Dorrance taught a man named Ray Hunt, and Ray Hunt taught a man named Buck. And then there's a documentary out called Buck.
That's the one I saw that too.
Right,
yeah.
So it kind of went that direction.
And what do they know that we don't know about? And if you can put it into words, and I'm sure there's some intuitive kind of things that you can't, but maybe you can, that interests me to know what is it, that connection between humans and horses? What can horses teach us? What do most people think a horse is, and what is it, and what isn't it?
Yeah. Tom Dorrance was on a different level than the rest of them. Even Buck, Ray Hunt, who taught Buck, I asked him one time, because he allowed me to start one of his colts, which was a really kind of an honor. But I asked him, where does all these other, it's called natural horsemanship, where do they compare to Tom? And he said, to Tom's 10, probably the best out there is a 5. That's how good that guy was. And he didn't do anything. He did so little, and that was the one thing that I learned from him, was less was more. And I applied that to myself, less was more. He was looking for a 1% change, not a 180. So when he saw a little change in that horse is looking for a quiet place. He learns from the release of pressure, not from pressure. So when you get him to do what he wants, let's say I want my horse to look or move to the right. When he makes that step, and I get real quiet and pet on him and let him sit there, he goes, oh, I know what happens when I make that step. I get to relax. Everything's good and quiet. Because horses, animals, like quiet. They like even. And so that was one thing that I learned from Tom. The other thing that he said, fascinating, he said the biggest problem with the human and the horse is the human ego. And I chewed on that forever. And what I realized is when I'm having a problem with the horse, guess who's having the problem? Me. It's not the horse. He's just being a horse. But what I do is I apply all my problems onto the horse, or I project them onto the horse. That's not what's happening at all. And I realized I've been doing that with human beings too. Mm-hmm. They didn't make me angry, they exposed my anger.
So in other words, it's almost like he's looking at the horse as a mirror rather than...
To some extent, yes, absolutely. Because, I mean, if I go in there, how do I want to put this? I've started Mustangs.
When you say started, I'm sure a lot of people don't know what that means.
Started means, like in some worlds they would call it break them. So taking a Mustang that's never been touched.
Teach
them, train them.
Yeah.
Okay, so the starting them is that first few rides. That would getting them gentle enough to put a halter on, to lead them around. So they're wanting to be with the human.
So there's been basically two approaches. One is what you say break, which is ego over horse and trying to break their spirit in some way, to conquer them, to make them acquiesce. And then the other way would be to release pressure, so it's more of a willingness on their part to do certain things because it feels right.
Yeah.
Okay.
To make my idea their idea. and to notice the tiniest, slightest try. And when I can catch, here you go, goes right into human behavior. When I can catch a horse thinking about something before it turns into behavior and either reward that or correct it, we got something. And if you watch closely, they'll tell you. They're just going, I think I'll move that foot. And if I'm wanting them to move that foot and reward it, they're going to go, oh, yeah. Or if they're thinking, I'm going to move that foot and that's not what I want, and I let them know, hey, come back here, they'll never go there again. And it's interesting watching these guys correct a horse. In one moment, they changed the whole I saw it happen right in front of me. I was working with a horse that was such a problem. And he was pretty rough with the horse. Matter of fact, a few of the women, I could hear him go,
yeah, when
he wrapped the horse with the end of the rope. I never had a problem again with that horse when he did that, when he was correcting it. And that was starting one. So I've started, what I was going back to is starting Mustangs or horses that have never been touched. And I've only started one. I make it sound like I've done. But just one. What I realized is horses are picking up energy, but they're picking up more of my body language. And I don't remember the percentage, but like over 80% of all communication is nonverbal.
And this is true of humans also.
True of humans. And horses, it's all nonverbal. They don't talk. So what I realized is
wait a minute, Mr. Ed talked.
He did talk. But you know what? There were several Mr. Eds.
And he was very smart.
He was very smart. Yes. Gosh, couldn't wait till Mr. Ed came on.
It's one of the greatest,
wasn't it,
experiences ever.
Maybe we should make another Mr. Ed.
Do you remember when he was in a jazz band? No. He was in a jazz trio. He was a singer. And he was doing really well. They had all the hipster beatnik jazz guys to back him up. But Wilbur had a front for him because he didn't want people to find out it was a horse that could sing.
I don't remember that one.
It was damn funny.
Is there some place we can watch those old?
Yeah, you can buy the DVDs.
Yeah, I love that. Gosh, I wanted Wilbur so bad as a kid.
Yeah,
I think all kids wanted a Wilbur though.
Or Ed.
Or Ed.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Ed. Well, all kids wanted to be Wilbur with an Ed.
I'd love that show because the horse was like, it was like a guy. He was married, but he still wanted to hang out with his best buddy and do stuff.
Yeah.
Without his wife knowing. That's really what that show was to me. Anyway, let's go back to horses. Real horses that can't talk.
So what I realized was that if that Mustang or that new horse, that young horse, could really pick up how I feel, when you go put your leg over him the first time, he'd be gone. Because if you ain't scared, there's something wrong with you. Because you go to get on that horse that first time, you're not real sure how that's going to go. And there's one thing I know 100% about horses. There's only one thing I'm 1,000% sure of. They are stronger than me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. They weigh a lot, and they don't have flab.
Yeah.
They're pure muscle.
So when I go to get on, if I can have all those feelings of fear going through me, but if I keep my body language even, they're cool. They don't have a problem. But I have to keep everything, I slow it all down, and it gets very deliberate. I know where every part of my body, I know if I have more weight on the right foot than the left foot. And when that started to happen, things started to click for me, because the old man, Tom Dorrance, when I went and saw him one time, he said, when you come up walking up to a horse, he knows everything about you because he's watching you. He's not thinking about you. He knows every line on your skin, your wrinkles on your clothes, when you blink your eyes. He's so observant. He's so present. He's seeing everything about you. So that set me on another journey, because I was trying to do that and I realized I couldn't do it. It was very difficult. I was very challenged to do that with the human because I had so many preconceived ideas.
Do they have amazing eyesight?
They do have amazing eyesight. They really do.
And do they? How do horses see? Not the same way we do, or obviously their eyes are kind of far apart on the sides of their heads, and they're big.
Right.
But do they have more visual acuity? And
they do.
Yeah.
you can't really see this, but if we take our hands and cup them over our nose, there's a blind spot right there.
In the center.
In the center. Also, there's a small blind spot right behind the tail.
Yeah.
But what's interesting with the horses, you can tell what's going on with them, and that's what you learn by being around horses for a long time. They can listen to different directions. They're prey animals, so their eyes are on the side of their head, so they can see everywhere. So you take a horse, especially out in the wild, or take it to someplace new, its senses are on complete alert. If anything moves,
it's scanning, auditory and visual constantly,
and smell.
Mm-hmm.
So they are so alert because they're prey animals. They don't miss a beat. And so what I learned there, and I talk a lot about in what I do, is animals are praying, or they're in meditation 24/7. That's what they do.
You're saying they're in the moment. They're not thinking about the past or the future like we do, or what's going to happen to me, other than just in the immediate risk of something. If there's a threat, they're not thinking, where's my next meal coming from, or anything like that. It's just they're just in the moment.
Or I wish I was a dog, or
I
wish I was a palomino instead of a spotted horse. Why don't I live over here? And how come I don't have a better stall than that other guy? That other horse?
Being those kind of creatures, and us being the way we are, what is the way that you work with horses? And let's say you have a person that has an issue that needs that wants to use your services. Give me an example of somebody that you've worked with. You don't have to tell me a name or anything.
I think some of the most fascinating things that I've seen is I've worked with some of the homeless people downtown. I've worked with the Midnight Mission. I've worked with some of the homeless kids on Venice and down here on the boardwalk. And there was a couple different places. One's called SPY, Safe Place for Youth. Another one's called the Venice Teen Project. What's really interesting is just not the horse. When I take those young people, or I've had some, some gang people that have been in treatment that came up. A couple of them, family members that have been or are on death row. So they've seen a lot of traumatic, violent stuff. And when they come up to the park, it's fascinating to watch because they have this whole persona, the way they carry themselves. Within minutes of being at Will Rogers, and Will Rogers is a magical place, but something happens to the human when he can see out and there's no man-made thing and it's nature.
Yeah.
Something happens to him. So I get him up there to the park, and there starts to be a calmness. The edge starts to go. But also what I like to do, especially with some of the tougher ones, is I put them in a round pen with the horse, ask him to do some things with the horse. And I'm thinking about the gang guy that had been involved with a gang and some of the homeless kids. It is amazing to watch them soften and lighten, and you've got a completely different human being within minutes, and I haven't done nothing. That's all about them being in nature and being out with a horse and being with an animal that doesn't care if they're a millionaire or they have 5 cents, or if they're Asian or Caucasian, where they live, how tall they are, what they smell like. They don't care. They're indifferent.
So they immediately or very quickly drop whatever persona that they're projecting in their home environment.
Yeah.
Without even realizing that's what they're doing, probably, right?
Yeah.
Are they dressed in, obviously they're probably dressed like, gang clothes, street clothes.
Yeah.
Which, obviously have certain meanings in their territories and things like that. That just doesn't mean anything.
Not to the horse, it doesn't.
Not to the horse, obviously,
It doesn't. They don't care.
Yeah.
All they care is about his body language. They kept a wide path from each other. They never fought.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, they know. They have an awareness. They knew.
They knew who the real deal was.
They knew who the real deal was. So does the horse, just by body language. So when somebody with presence, and they used to say when I was a kid, I heard this, that a horse sees in pictures. Now I'm realizing, no, I kind of disagree. He doesn't see in pictures. What happens is when I have a clear picture in my mind of what I'm going to do, my body language changes. Right?
Yes.
When I know real clearly what I'm going to do. Or, as Tom Dorn said, he said, you want to do as little as it takes, but you have to be willing to do whatever it takes. Do as little as it takes, but be willing to do whatever it takes. Though I only do to the horse what the horse makes me do. And they learn real quickly that I'm going to give you the best deal. So if I'm going to say between 1 and 10, I'm always going to ask it a 1. I'm going to give you the best deal I possibly can. Or that's the ideal. I probably don't get it done. So what happens is when these people go out there, you kind of find out real quickly who's bluffing and who's not. And the horse will let you know. Some people come out pretty aggressive and the horse is kind of young, like, okay, yeah, I see you. But then you see some of these other guys, their body language are like, oh, yeah, there's something going on with this dude. Because I work with some of the population that comes up pretty tough population.
Do they ever try to get physical with the horses to control them that way? I mean, obviously they recognize the thing's huge.
They do. I've had a couple people, nothing, I watch pretty closely, but I've had a couple people like come pretty hard, slap the horse on the rump to try to get it to move, that I'm thinking, wow, you came in at not between 1 and 10, you came in at a 20. Big. And there's the other thing we haven't talked about that, Bob, is that the way that I do anything is the way that I do everything. And for me...
You're saying anyone is like that?
Anyone.
Yes. The way you do anything is the way you do everything.
Yeah. So that's the journey where the equine work has gone for me, as I give them exercises to do or ask them questions, and people will tell me their stories pretty quickly and show me what's going on. Depending on where they're at, some of the people I'm working with are newly sober, so they're pretty fragile. They come in, and I don't want to blow them out of the water,
Yeah. Now, when you say, like, go catch that horse, are you giving them a rope to put around their neck?
Yeah.
And the horse just walks away when they come toward it?
Yeah. So there's a perfect exercise. I give them something to do. Sit back and watch to see what happens. It's fascinating because what I found is there's 3 phrases that human beings struggle with so much. I don't know what to do. Can you help me? And I drew a blank on the other one. That's how hard it is to remember. But I need help. Can you help me? I mean, I've had people from treatment centers come out that run treatment centers, clinical teams, administrative teams, and they'll be out there just can't figure it out. And it never dawned on them to go, I need some help. Can you help me?
And that shows up in their work at their center.
Shows up in their work, yeah. And I'm finding that, and it's been such a help for me, is I'm realizing drug addict, alcoholic, CEO, the biggest challenge that we have is that we're all fear-based, pretending like it's not there, doing the best, putting the best mask I can. I'm going to get the best personality put together to go out and deal with the world, because really, in truth, deep down, I'm scared. How do I deal with that out there? And I see it with the young people, especially that I work with at Will Rogers. When it comes down to it, they're trying to figure out, to back up a step, the reason I realized that we like nature, because it's natural. When you're out there with nature and horses, everything's just natural. Even if it's kind of dangerous, you feel natural. There's an ease. When you're up at Will Rogers, it's kind of a metaphor. It's above the city, and we can look down. And I always point down to the city. That's not a natural act. All that moving around really fast, trying to go out and be somebody and everything else is just not natural. It's not a natural act. And it's fascinating to see the human being change. when they can see that.
Do you ever have somebody just have an emotional breakdown or catharsis, when they've been working with these horses, and the realization, like a big moment, because those are always, you don't see them a lot, or a change from one time to the next time they come?
I see a lot of people that come in that are so hard. They're they have so much armor up there. I see the armor start to drift away, start to fall off. And so they're able to talk to me. And so it's a lot different than sitting down and doing a normally counseling session, because what's happening is you're not telling me about what's been going on. I can sit back and in real time go, this is what I'm seeing you do. That's hard to overcome. This is what I just saw you do.
Give me an example.
Let's say we had a group. I had a treatment center come out, and there were some challenges going on. I didn't know it.
How many people?
There must have been 12.
12 people, and these were all the staff, or
all the staff,
clients also?
No, just the staff.
Okay, so treatment center staff came to learn about what you do.
Yep.
Okay.
And there was some conflict going on there. When they went to walk off, because there was different departments, as they went to walk off, it was amazing to see each department was on its own. And they were already starting to separate. And I just said, freeze. And they looked around, and their story was already being told. The one department was way, way ahead of the other ones. Nobody really had a plan, but they had their own little group already set up. Do you follow me?
Yes.
So absolutely. It was already starting to show. And then when I said, okay, I'm going to give you guys 1 minute. I'm going to time you. You got 1 minute to discuss the plan. So there's a little pressure there. It was fascinating to see who could talk, who couldn't talk, the body language of everyone.
Did you say could or couldn't, allowed to or not allowed to? Is that what you mean? Or
there was people that had ideas that were held back. And not only would they hold back, but they were standing about 2 feet off the rest of the herd. And I talked to people about herd mentality, that we are a herd. And when they come in there, they're part of that herd. And it's fascinating to watch, to see where everybody's at. You can see who's engaged, who's not engaged, by just where they're standing. They show their story. They're showing it. So I can just point it out, going, just freeze. Where are you standing? Are you part of the herd or are you not? How's that going? Is that working for you? So they'd be the really easy ones. I think the other thing that I noticed the most too is watching people come in so hard. When I was talking about between 1 and 10, some of the guys coming in, crystal meth usually crystal meth users seem to be this way. They come in at a 10
because they're still wired.
Well, some of them are, and some of them aren't. I mean, a couple of the places they brought out people to me that are just detoxing, and because it's working. I'm very careful. I'm really gentle with them, but it's nice for them to be up there because they can kind of breathe. But I think that was the biggest thing that I noticed, is watching some of these people come in so hard and quick and fast. They don't even know what they're doing. And they're in there. They're engaged. They're pushing. They're forcing. They're making it happen. And that just doesn't work out there in the world for the drug addict and alcoholic. Our job, and what I found is one of the biggest thing is for an alcoholic and an addict is to surrender, to let go, to relax and take it easy and stop trying to make things happen, as opposed to allowing my life to unfold instead of trying to force it. And you can see people forcing things with the horse, and then it's fascinating to watch when I go, just breathe, just let this open up, just see where this flows. And pretty soon they got the horse moving around, the horse is connected with them, and you can see it. Even the people up there that aren't horse people, they can see that connection. even if the horse isn't standing next to him, because there's something about you and I right now have a field of energy around us. You have one too. And when I have them working in the round pen together, you can kind of see it. When someone's working, you can see that circle of energy entwine and how it's working with each other. And it's kind of hard to explain, but you can see it once you're out there. And all the people can see it. Mm-hmm. So that seems to be something that really helps them out. Because like I said, we're not sitting down talking about something you did yesterday. We're talking about, hey, this is what you did right now. Hard to overcome that. And it's
you can't. You're right. You can't lie about it.
Can't lie.
It's right there.
It's right there.
So, do they ride? Also,
I have put them on.
Yes, but it's mostly just walking and touching the horse and catching it and that kind of thing. Or
I think the thing that's helped me out the most, Bob, is that I started working my first job in recovery. I had 6 months. I lied. You're supposed to have a year, and I needed a job. And it was a lockup unit, and so I worked around a really tough population. I've worked with adolescents and adults. I've worked with multiple personality. At that time, we didn't have bipolar; it was mostly manic depressive. But I've seen it all. I've had people in 5-point restraint, and so what happens when they come up to the park? I kind of take my time and find out what's going on with them.
This is before a horse even appears?
Yep. So the reason I say that is some of the groups that have come up, I'm thinking when they get there, I think it's just, let's just have them brush the horse and let's everybody get comfortable and let me see, talk to them a little bit, see if I can't get them opened up. Maybe I'll just start there. There's different things that I have them do. The grooming would depend on where they're at. But I think that's the gift of me working on those different places. I've got to read on people pretty good, I'm working with different populations with eating disorders and gambling and codependency. There was so much going out there. And then really people that went through some real trauma. I've worked with young people that have been through some really dark, traumatic things. And you can tell. If you watch closely as they get out of the van, you can see it. So then I changed my game plan completely around to them. So that could be just grooming. Sometimes I have them just leading the horse, Sometimes I have them work as a group. And I'm kind of get a read on that, on how that group is. Maybe they need to work together. So, depends on the population.
You were telling me about I think it was a young girl who had some sort of anxiety disorders or whatever. I don't even like the word disorder, but
yeah, right. Actually, you know what? I heard somebody say, it actually made sense. Post-traumatic stress disorder.
Mm-hmm.
He called it post-traumatic. I can't remember what it was now. He had a different word for it.
Reaction?
Gosh, I don't remember, but I was on the same thing with the disorder.
Yeah. Because it already puts a kind of a negative feel onto a situation, and if it's a natural reaction to something that's happened, is that really a disorder, or is that actually in order for what's happened previous? It wouldn't anyone feel that way or react that way. Yeah. So tell me about that the girl that came, the young girl with the anxiety, came with her parents?
She came with her parents. Really interesting, she to get her to work with the horse and even stay with me, and the thing that I really...
How old? I know you told
13.
Me. 13, okay.
But what I noticed is, and I talk to all clients about that come up there, is going down the rabbit hole. And you can kind of tell where people are at, and you're going to be able to notice this when you go out. When I'm going about my day, and if my gaze is about 2 feet in front of me, I'm kind of in trouble. There's a lot going on. If my gaze comes up a little bit and it's 10 feet, a little bit better. But if I'm looking up and around, I'm taking in my whole day, the tops of the trees and everything, I'm in a pretty good space. What I've noticed with people that have trauma, and everyone has trauma to some extent. I mean, just driving on the 10 freeway can be a trauma. But what I noticed with some of the young people and her was I couldn't get her gaze. She looked down the whole entire time. But as time went on, and we talked about this because horses, animals, they're taking in everything. Just remember, like we were talking earlier, they're taking in everything. They're looking up and around, they're listening, they're smelling. And as her gaze started to come up, her whole being started to change. And when I gave her things to do with the horse, and I was trying to really understand, is she enjoying this? She wasn't super engaged. And what I realized is that that's what it is for her in life. It's hard for her to really engage, to really be involved in something 100%. There was always something holding her back. So I just put her in the round pen with the horse by herself, and I didn't give her anything I didn't tell her anything was right or wrong. I just want you to go out there and spend some time with the horse. And everything started to shift and change. I kept talking to her about looking up and around. And pretty soon she started to pay less attention on where the parents were at and more attention with the horse. And now she's all into horses and more inclined to come out and work with the horses right now than actually her primary therapist. She's getting that much out of being up there and being with the horses. She wasn't leaving her house at all, staying there at the computer, which happens an awful lot. So when these young people are locked into their computer, their world's really small. You get up there at the park and the world gets really big.
Well, it's an interesting thing when you say about the gaze, because I know when I'm troubled, my gaze is narrow. And I think it's because I was trying to think, why is that? Well, I'm thinking about the thing that happened, but I'm also looking, the world's too harsh and I don't want to deal with it. That's really the feeling that I'm having in those moments. It's just, I can't have another bad thing happen, and if I look around and it's out there,
right,
I won't be able to take it.
Right.
And I think that's part of the thing that's going on with the computers and the phones. I mean, when you look around, you see people just in these things. They're in them. I mean, they're the quote real world is not as either exciting. It's certainly not as controllable. And I think it frightens people, but I think they also get pulled into, when you look around. I was at the airport the other day, and people were clamoring to get the outlets to keep their phones charged so they could be on their iPhones or whatever kind of phone they had to, look at media and text and all that, and no one was talking to each other. And this younger guy and this older man started a conversation, and they were the only ones talking. And they were asking questions and laughing and having this really nice conversation. And I remember looking around, and other people weren't uncomfortable, but they just didn't want anything to do with even hearing it.
Right.
They were an oddity in that situation. Now, an airport's obviously not a super social situation, but it could be. I mean, back when I traveled more before this stuff existed,
right,
I got in a lot of conversations with people as we were waiting.
Yeah.
This just wasn't happening. So I'm sort of fascinated by the fact that these, it's bringing the gaze up and it's engaging them in the world that they've retreated from.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the parents are with the kid here. Are you noticing family dynamics too that may...
All the time. Shows everything. To back up to the airport situation, that's really great insight, and it's something I've looked at too, is that what I realized is a lot of those things they're just distractions. I use them as distractions because what you were talking about earlier about it's scary world out there, it keeps me distracted from all that. It's my distraction, to keep myself distracted. And also you were saying how agitated or anxious these people were as they stayed in the media, right?
Yeah, and the idea that they may lose power on their phone. I mean, they were really. I was watching them. When somebody got up from one of the outlets, the power outlets, there was this weird thing where everyone's sort of like, should I take it? I'm going to be more aggressive than this person, and I'm going to get that power. Yeah. I can't lose power because I got to be connected on my phone.
Yeah. Well, and how will I live without my distraction? Right? Because I call my pain pleasure. Right? I call my trash treasure. Right? And that's what it is, because when I'm in that state, guess what? I'm in anxiety. And it's hard for the human to go, you know what? I prefer my anxiety over calmness, relaxation. And what I learned, and with the horses I talk about, I can either have a thought life or conscious awareness. I can't have both. Thought life or conscious awareness. And we talk about that. We work about that. The beauty about horses and animals, people always say they're unconditional love, and I've thought about that a lot. You know what I realized? What I saw is the animal is willing to give you a second chance. That's what I saw, conditional love. I mean, I've done unconditional love by giving people another shot, by being willing to start over. What a most amazing unconditional loving thing you could do is if we could allow each other to start over. Even in like relationships and families and marriage, I'm finding the biggest challenge for couples that have been out is starting over, to leave yesterday as yesterday, right? That's the biggest challenge.
So you have couples come out to work on their marriages or their relationships?
They have when they've come out there. Yeah. And it shows itself really fast. Yeah. By how they go about the horse, who's first, who's second, talking over each other. Yeah.
That must be a hard thing to point out to a couple. Look at you. You've talked over this person every single time.
Yeah. I'm careful about it.
You'd be smart to do that.
Duck. I always ask.
I don't like that guy.
Are you open? Are you open? Or would you consider this? I'm going to point out some things for you to consider. Whatever you want to do with it. But usually when people come to the park, I always point out that, you know what, you have a certain level of willingness because you came all the way here. Right there, your body language told me that you must be willing to do something. There's some willingness there. Maybe it's not a lot, but there's something. Right? Something in you is inquisitive. Something in you is willing to change just by coming.
Yeah.
Right? So that tells me a lot.
That's already ahead of most people's willingness.
Right.
Just to show up.
Yep. So I think a lot of the work that happens with the horses is I give them things to look at, and it may take a long time for that to sink in. But hopefully somewhere down the line they go, you know what? I do that. It happened again.
So maybe you'll point something out and you'll say, I'm assuming, you'll say, why don't you look at this during the week and see if this shows up again and again.
Yeah.
And people will come back.
Yeah. And see things about themselves. I talk a lot about, especially with people in recovery, the biggest challenge that I find, it's just not people in recovery. We talked earlier before we started was that we talked about the norming. I told you I'm still looking I can't find one. But people's biggest challenge is to be present and to be aware of themselves and be present for their lives. And what I realized for myself was, and we talk about it up there, that nature is meditation itself. That is meditation. That it's always going forward, it's always changing, but it's always right now. It's always going forward, it's always changing, but it's always right now. I mean, right now, our physical bodies, our physical form is changing. Even as we speak, things are changing. And there's such a big planet going on. And when I can get people start to ponder that the same energy that makes my hand move makes the horse's leg move. Not only does that same energy do that to our arm and that horse's leg, It makes trees grow. And I didn't really realize this until a couple years ago, that all living organisms on the planet, every single living organism has the same genetic code. That's a scientific fact. These aren't airy-fairy ideas that I came up with. They are scientific facts. So in a way, we are one. We were really meant to be one. And the thing that separates a lot is man's thought,
Yeah. Well, I notice, I don't spend as much time in nature as I did when I was a kid, but I certainly know that my anxiety level it's almost non-existent when I'm in those situations, when I'm outdoors. I mean, it's even if I walk down to the beach, I guess that's nature.
It is pretty nature.
Yeah, and there's a level of relaxation when you leave a place like that you don't even realize until you're, how much mind chatter goes on in daily life that just makes me anxious.
Yeah. Great point. Because also were you going to say something?
No.
What you brought up was something I was going to mention. So a lot of people come up and put them in the pen with the horse or whatever would be going on. And I'll ask them, what do you see in the horse? And they'll start talking, and really they're telling me about themselves, not about the horse. Well, he seems angry. Okay.
Nothing like an angry horse.
But what is it about him what are you seeing? Well, he just seems that way. And I go, well, tell me more what you're seeing. So really they're going by the story they have about the situation instead of the reality of the situation, which happens to us all day long. We have this story of what we think is going on in reality. There's nothing going on. Nothing going on at all. And I've seen that. I can't tell you how many times I've heard about, he doesn't like me.
That's it. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
the horse doesn't like me.
The horse doesn't like me. Yeah. And I said, well, tell me more, because I can tell you horses are not codependent. When they're done with you, they don't go, hey, man, you okay? Don't take this personal. They just leave. They're gone. See ya. They don't check in. They don't want to make sure your feelings aren't hurt. They just walk off. So I keep telling them, well, the horse is still standing here. That's telling me something. Right? So right there's a perfect point right there that you're seeing the horse doesn't like you, but it's standing right next to you with its head down, relaxed. That story ain't jiving. And is this happening in other parts of your life? Are you telling yourself stories about what other people are doing when there's nothing going on? And that's what I realized. It's not that people cause me. It's not what you're doing that causes me problems. It's not my relationships that cause me problems. It's my thoughts about the relationships or the situation that cause me a great deal of problems.
And also the expectations of what you think you are or are not owed by that person's behavior.
Yeah.
Like you say, the horse walks away when it's done without checking in.
Yeah.
Now, if a person did that, you might say, what a selfish person, and who doesn't really care about me, and I have needs here that they're not addressing. And is there something even more ridiculous than the horse doesn't like me that you've heard from somebody? Like what's the most far-fetched kind of thought that somebody might say about what they see?
Well, actually, the most far-fetched one. Yeah, I've been around horses all my life. I really know them. I really, I've raised horses. I've been around horses, and they know nothing. They know absolutely nothing about a horse. That's something that I find fascinating.
So they've had a lot of experience, but they haven't learned.
Well,
what do you mean by when you're saying that?
Well, I was going to. Yeah, thank you. Because you and I talked about it earlier. That man's biggest challenge, I read this a long time ago, it struck me that the biggest delusion of man is that he doesn't live in delusion. And it's so challenging, and it's fascinating because these people are like that in real life. They already know. Hard to get anything in there when it's already full of, I already know. Happens all the time. I already know. So I just turn them loose and sit back and watch. I don't have to do anything. It blows them. They blow themselves out of the water. Happens all the time. Yeah, I was raised on we had a 100-acre ranch and wherever, you know. And we're around horses all the time. I used to ride around bareback, and, you know, we didn't even have a bridle. We did all this.
Okay.
And then I give them something to do with the horse, and they're lost. They can't do it.
You'd think that would not be the case if you, like
Not
you said,
anymore.
you had experience
Not
growing
anymore.
up around horses.
There's a lot to it. There's so much. It's just like life. I find horses and dogs, it's kind of a side subject, but I found with horses and dogs, some people are comfortable with the horse that just hangs out in the backyard and does very little, and, you know, maybe they can take it for a trail ride. They can't really get out of a walk, and they got to stay in a group, and they got to stay on the trail, and they got to be careful around, you know, things that are blowing. They can't go out on a windy day, or, you know, those type of things. But, you know, they can take the horse out a little bit. What I found for myself is I would have been blessed enough to be around some people that were really amazing with dogs and amazing with horses. And when they showed me what that horse will want to do for me and the connection that I could get, I went, oh my gosh, there's so much more I just didn't know. And it's the same thing with the human. Where I'm trying to get to is to let them know there's so much more in life. We just don't know. We're not taking advantage of what's there. There's so much more. It sees it all the time. Buck, when he gave a clinic over here in Pasadena this last year, there was 30 people in the morning class, 30 people in the night class, 100 and some spectators. Buck has, if you see his movie or any of these natural horsemen, they have a certain hat, and they have certain bits and bridles and saddles, and they talk a certain way, and they all have a flag, and he has his own books and DVDs, and most of the people have that. And not that I have this down, because I don't. But as the clinic went on, and about the third day, I was listening to some people talking. I was like, man, you know, they really have this down. And then I watched them try to help some people that had been in the clinic. And I went, oh, you can't actually do it. You can only talk about it. You've only read and talked about it. You can't do it. And what I realized is some people are much more content and happy just reading and talking about it. They're not really interested in doing it. And they're not ready to let go to get to that place. And during that group, if we were to take somebody out, and I'm average, but if we had to go do a job, let's say we're going to go gather cattle, and there was all these people that have been around horses all their life, there was maybe 2 or 3 that we could take with us that wouldn't actually just be in the room. Isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just from watching that. So I've thought about that a lot. Now I see I had a dog, and I've seen a lot of people that are saying my dog is a really, really great dog. And it probably is. They just haven't asked a lot. But when you go asking a lot, and the same thing with you and I, problems don't go away, behavioral problems don't go away, they only become manageable. So what happens is with the horse and the dog, they're pretty good right here, but when you change the environment, all of a sudden you're going, hey, I've never seen my dog act like that before. I've never seen my horse act like that before. It was always in there. You just haven't seen it, never got exposed. The same things happens in the equine. I point out, it's always been there. It's just never been exposed. So that has a lot to do with the work. And it's pretty interesting because I'm trying to expose their darkness to light and my own. So the light's what the healing is.
I don't know why this just popped in my head, but I love the smell of horses.
Yeah, right?
I don't know why. I always have since I was a kid. Whenever I was around it, I used to ride a little bit when I was a kid. I mean,
Yeah.
A long time ago. And I just loved the smell.
Mm.
And I don't know, it just felt like it was something that's, I don't know what would be the word, ancient, primal,
Natural.
but more so than anything else, pet-wise, you know.
They're vegetarians.
Maybe that's what it is, and
They're
maybe that.
vegetarians.
Oh, okay.
Have you ever gone on a detox, a cleanse?
Yes.
At a certain point, if you really eat clean, you don't have body odor. And I went to a place and did a detox and a cleanse. If you wear perfume or deodorant with the smell, it's repelling. It's actually repulsive. You can't be around perfume because of the smell. And you don't need deodorant if you're eating real clean. Yeah.
That would make sense.
Yeah, right. And the horse just eats, he's pure vegetarian. It doesn't smell at all.
We actually feed them better than we do ourselves.
Yeah, right. And actually, that does happen with my horses.
Yeah.
You know, they get taken pretty good care of. Yeah.
So is this a growing field? Would you say? Is it becoming more recognized, or is it still fairly niche kind of thing? I mean, it obviously requires a certain amount of money and space and maintenance, and there's a lot of. It seems like there's a lot of sort of business around it that requires a lot. But are people becoming more aware that this is a value? Because I had never heard of it until a few years ago when some friends of mine took their daughter. She was having some anxiety stuff, and they had remarkable results. But it was it was a long drive, and it was a lot of time, and then the people had to maintain the horses and all that.
It's challenging.
Yeah,
it's really, really challenging. It's difficult. It's been out there for quite a while. I think it's gone really well. A lot of people that I know are people that have a real love for horses and being out there with them, and so they want to pass on what they learned and what they've got out of it. The challenge is getting that done. That's where it gets really difficult. Some of the not-for-profits do pretty well, and every once in a while they can raise money and keep it going. I've somehow been able to, but I do other things. I do interventions, I do counseling to keep myself going. And then also I've worked it out where people come in, my horses that I have, a lot of the equine assisted therapy learning places, they use rescue horses. I've been around some really great horsemen. So my horses, they're really nice to ride. They're like riding Ferraris, but they're super quiet. So what I've been able to do is, there's a few people, since it's here in LA, they lease out my horses on the stipulation I can use them when I want them. They get my help so I can teach them. They get to use my tack. So I keep my costs down low. And them getting the opportunity to ride those kind of horses is unheard of. They just would never get that opportunity because they're really nice horses. They cost me some money. I went out and bought nice horses. They weren't a rescue. They weren't a donation. Nothing wrong with that. I just know that those horses could be challenging to ride and to learn how to ride because they didn't get that time put into them. So they don't have the subtle...
They have a chance. If they're rescues, there's maybe been some damage.
Some damage, yeah. And the time, it's just like anything. If you had a really good parent raise a kid, opposed to a parent that didn't know anything and wasn't really there and stuff going on, you got a different kid. You have somebody that really knows how to start a horse, man, you got a different horse.
Well, thank you so much, man. It was fantastic talking to you. Anything else you want to say?
It's interesting what I found, and I
made that up. No, I didn't. I didn't.
You know what I like to use? The phrase that seems to break down all barriers? Hey, I need your help. I very seldom do I get people that... Usually most people will soften just a little bit. I need your help. I don't care if they don't even like you if you come up and go, I need your help. That changes. That's just a game changer for people. At least it is for me. If somebody comes to me that I don't like, or I'm not getting along with, if they go, hey, I need your help, and the way they present it in a certain way, I'll kind of settle down and ask. But it's fascinating to see that the way we do anything, the way that we do everything with those horses is, can you help me? Because I'll set up an exercise for me to be out there and say, you can use anything in this arena. With me standing there, nobody's going to go, can you help me? They don't do it. It just doesn't happen.
So they don't ask you?
Never.
And then do you point that out?
Afterwards,
you say that was one of the options that you didn't use.
Yep,
you would have helped me? I mean, what do they say? Yeah. They just...
oh, gosh, I would have. Yeah, right. Everybody always says that. Oh, but it just, can you help me? Or I don't know. It just doesn't come out so easy. There are a few
What if you said, instead of you can use anything in this arena, you can use anything or anybody? You think they'd be more apt? That's like saying...
I'm trying to be careful about that.
Yeah.
I want them to, A, is try to think out of the box, but B is just to see human nature. Human nature does not go, I need your help. I mean, all I have to do is turn on TV. Hey, I need your help. I think the thing that, before we close, that I really love about the animals, the horses, my horses up there I'd used on some TV shows and some people rode, and it helped me change so much, was that my horses had movie stars and billionaires on them, and homeless kids. They don't know the difference. And what I started to realize is that my higher power does not know the difference between a man with $5 million and a man with 5 cents. Doesn't know the difference between the President of the United States and the janitor at McDonald's. Unfortunately, I do. And that's when I started to get a completely different concept of thing, is up there with the horse. And from that, I realized that my higher power, God, doesn't have a memory. And when I go into memory, I just unplug myself from the universe. So it's interesting to see these people and point these things out, and we'll see where their minds have taken them, and when they get to that place where everything's still, where things work out. And so I always close with them, and close here, is that the kingdom of heaven is in the space in between two thoughts. I just have to go find that space.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
It's good wrapping.
Yeah, you too, man. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Well, that was Brad Langenberg, and the end of my third podcast episode of The Exploding Human. If you'd like to send me an email, I would love to hear from you. It's bob@theexplodinghuman.com. Let me know what you think. If there's things you'd like me to talk about, people you'd like me to try to interview, topics, open to it all, as long as it's in that realm of body, mind, and spirit, which kind of covers a huge swath of humanity there. You can also give me a call. I have a Google Voice that I set up, 424-272-6396. I'd love to hear any kind of feedback. Doesn't matter if it's good, bad, or in the middle. I'd love to, make this thing work and make it so people really want to hear it. So thanks for listening in, and try to listen to the next one. Okay, thanks.